which is about deployment and infrastructure. Interestingly titled, What Deployment, Where, Why and How? I didn't write that title, so you'll forgive me if my content deviates slightly. I'd like to talk about the thinking that's been going on in the foundation and certain parts of the community as well, and some of the work that is in progress in these areas. Again, I'll start with a little bit of background. The strategy so far in Moduloop's lifetime has been to allow the community to develop, maintain, support, and push a variety of deployment methodologies and tools, tool chains that suit their particular use cases or the use cases that their adopters or clients have had at the time. Approach has turned out to have pros and cons. More options might become available to potential adopters, and certainly having lots of options doesn't seem like a bad thing. Obviously, more likely that a certain option will fit a particular need if there are lots of options to choose from. Another benefit of having the community develop these solutions is that individual partners can showcase their skills and their particular philosophies of deployment, which may suit certain use cases more than others. But if everybody's pulling in different directions, there is a risk, of course, that efforts and focus might become fragmented. Underlying this, I think there are a couple of fundamentals that I'd like to just restate. I don't think these would be controversial. Moduloop should be vendor independent with minimal requirement for big tech pay-to-play solutions. I don't think I have to say much about that. But also that Moduloop should ideally target low cost, low barrier to entry, deployment, operation and maintenance packages. So when we're thinking about strategy, plans for making deployment solutions for Moduloop, we should keep those two things in mind. Right now, what are the currently envisaged deployment use cases? These go from curious experimenter, somebody who comes along, finds Moduloop, wants to understand what it's about. Developers and contributors, people who want to help the Moduloop project. They come along and they need to be able to run the software, presumably on their desktop or laptop or some development environment in order to test the changes that they're making to the source code. Another deployment requirement is for continuous integration. Good engineering practice tells us that we should compile, build, test our software every time we make a change, so we know if we've broken things early. Again, referring back to that shift left philosophy, knowing about problems early saves time, cost, and energy. Public cloud is another one of the obvious deployment scenarios, where a lot of effort's been focused in the past in the Moduloop world, mostly on mono cloud, but we do envisage potential for multi-cloud and hybrid cloud in the future. Those deployments tend to be, I think, because of the cost footprint, slightly more tend towards a proof of concept with real participants wanting to test how Moduloop works for them in the real world. And certainly, it's not unheard of that these platforms need to be production quality, and that means they need to have all of the attributes that a production quality software system should have. It should be reliable, it should have good redundancy, record keeping, all of those additional requirements that you don't have to worry about in a development or non-production world, and you have to worry about when real money is involved. On-premises. On-premises is a current area of focus. There are obviously different ways of deploying Moduloop in an on-premises situation. You could build your own private cloud using a tech stack like OpenStack, or you could put Kubernetes on bare metal, or you could think of a hybrid situation where you might run some components in your own private cloud or on bare metal and some stuff in the cloud, maybe a managed service for one of the backend services like EVMS or Kafka. So what do we support right now? Well, thanks to the Lewis family, we have Miniloop and Docker Compose, which cover a large number of those first few scenarios: Puris Experimenter, development, contribution, and CI environments. Those are pretty well covered. Public cloud, yes, for a single cloud provider. The IAC that's in the current Moduloop open source repos will deploy your Moduloop into AWS. There's also an Azure Marketplace Moduloop deployment you can use. On-premises is where we have the biggest gaps at the moment. There is work in progress within the foundation and the community to fill those gaps, to shore up our support for bare metal type deployments and other on-premise scenarios as well. This is currently the highest priority for the Moduloop Foundation, because the list of potential Moduloop adopters who are queuing up to get all the benefits of a Moduloop inclusive payments platform are telling us that they need to deploy on-premise because of local regulation in the areas where they operate. So, I'd like to assert at this point that although there is some documentation available, it is hard for adopters who come along to the Moduloop to quickly understand what options are available and which one best suits their particular needs. I think we need to address this problem. I think we should do it by providing a high-level map of the options. It's easy for people to navigate. But also, we need to produce more detailed and focused documentation for each of the deployment scenarios. There is very good documentation on how to deploy Moduloop using Helm into Kubernetes, but much of the detail that you would need to worry about in a production environment isn't included. How do you deploy the test step in a way that means if you have a hardware failure, you're not going to lose your service? These kind of things are very, very important for national scale infrastructure that we think Moduloop needs to worry about. We need to document those things, and we need to make it easy for people to come along and do that stuff without too much friction. So, on the right-hand side of this slide, you'll see one of my clumsy first attempts at building that map. This is just one small section of the map. It's quite busy, but expect the full version to be available in the coming weeks. The idea is it's a flowchart, so you can start asking yourself a few questions. I'm not sure if you can see on there. Oh, you can see on there. That's good. So you'd start at the top. This is an example for learning and experimentation. So you would drop in here. If you have a desktop, a laptop, or a virtual machine that meets the minimum requirements, well, then you just drop down into the next step, which asks you whether you're a confident user of Kubernetes and Helm. Well, if you're not, would you like to be? Would you like to experiment? Yes. In which case, you get pushed towards one of the solutions, in this case, Miniloop. If not, well, Docker Compose is probably the right thing for you. So I hope you can see that we're trying to embed that kind of decision logic into an easy-to-follow flowchart that will guide people who aren't experts in Kubernetes or Helm or the modular software architecture. We just help them find the right place to go in documentation and in the code repository so they can quickly get started deploying a modular and understanding how it works. The second thing that we're working on quite intensively at the moment is these next 2 points, documentation for hardware recommendations. On-premises, there's lots of potential options. I think it's important that we say what we recommend the Moduloop to be run on. There's a lot of scope for opinion to play a role here, but I think Moduloop, the Moduloop community, the foundation, need to make some statements about what we recommend and what do we think the best way of running Moduloop is and why. That documentation is work in progress at the moment. It's about 80% complete. The second one of those documents talks about how to configure your Kubernetes worker nodes, how to spread pods across those nodes to give you those production quality attributes you'd be looking for, like high availability, resilience to failure, data redundancy. That's also missing right now in the community, and it's up to individual adopters to go and hire some experts who might tell you how to do that. Well, we think the foundation should be providing that guidance, so we're filling that gap right now. All right, that's my update for now. Again, please ask questions in the chat or raise your hand.
If there are any questions, because we've got 2 minutes to time, I'll give a chance for one person to voice their question. If you have, just speak in the chat or raise your hand.
One comment from Tom.
There's a comment from Tom.
About the deployment of Kafka. Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Oh, well, no, well, we're going to talk about something just in a minute with BizHub that actually goes directly to one piece of technology for that solution, Kubernetes technology.
Oh, great. Yeah, okay, I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing about that, Tom. Thanks.
Yeah, but the point is well made about, I think if we're going to have an enterprise deployment, then we need to actually start making enterprise deployment recommendations, and I fully concur with that.
That's great. Thank you, Tom.